literature of Gainesville, the books of CMC, published officially, and DIY. So, let's see. This is a joint panel between, well, it's a panel for Samuel Proctor History, Oral History Project, of course, but we just wanted to hear from the CMC coordinator before we commence the panel, because this is to celebrate the CMC being here for 31 years, and yeah, we just want to talk about the CMC for a minute. So I'm going to introduce our current coordinator, Sloan. Sloan has been the coordinator of the CMC since 2023, and since then there have been multiple committees that have been formed with Sloan's help. So that's really cool, and yes, Sloan's just going to speak a little bit and enjoy it. Enjoy their little speech.
Is it sufficiently loud?
You might want to go on.
I guess. Cool. Hi. I want to talk about cybernetics and how futuristic the the CMC is, which I promise will make sense in the context of an event about history. So cybernetics is the science of organization, the systems of feedback loops that everything is rooted in. There's a lot to it, as is the case with the sciences, obviously, but I want to illustrate like three main parts of it that I found helpful. So with dynamic systems, dynamic meaning things that change, which is pretty much everything that you're going to be interacting with. There's the meta system, the operations, and the environment as the three components that interrelate to each other. So using the human body as an example, the meta system would be the nervous system in the brain, which kind of guide the operations of your body, like the way you move your limbs, talking, and interact with the world and stuff. The meta system also determines your sense of self, your beliefs, the why behind your operations. And it does this based off of input from your operations, but also input from your environment to the system and everything, and also the feedback from all that. And so that cyclical relationship is part of universal laws of nature that can be applied to all dynamic systems. Everything from single-celled organisms, your friendships, water cycle, local small business or worker cooperative, national government, etc. All these things have the same three components of the meta system, operations, and environment. One of the main reasons why cybernetics and Stepperbeer's environmental system model in particular exists is to help people with democratic decision-making and self-management, so that people feel like they both have autonomy, but also so that they feel like they are part of a cohesive whole, that they aren't giving up their autonomy to be part of something bigger than themselves. It does this while avoiding language like centralization versus decentralization, which kind of gum up your ability to make good decisions, in my opinion. So there are a few things that really make the CMC stick out from other places that are a direct result of our interactions with these dynamic systems. And these examples also have things that we can improve upon if we more actively applied cybernetic principles to them. And I've started writing a diagnosis of the CMC using the viable systems model to help us function better. So the first example is that you don't really need to have a gender at the CMC, which is kind of a joke, but also kind of real. Because like the CMC is deeply connected to the local queer community in the way that feels very politically queer with a capital Q, and more than just kind of being accepting and open to like people who identify as LGBTQIA+. And I've seen multiple people reshape their worldview with regards to gender and their relationship to the world because of the time they spend at the CMC. And it's funny in particular to see cis men try to struggle to wrap their head around it. It's really cool and futuristic because there's glimpses here and there of almost being post-gender and not really needing this outdated oppressive system anymore. But I think there's still work to be done, especially regarding transisotomy and the overall small amount of trans women who are involved here, even though I've been told it's the most accepting place in town to be there, to be a trans woman. A second thing that makes us different is the mask requirements. With the COVID pandemic since 2020, we've learned how to protect each other from unnecessary urban illnesses and disability, how to not move at the fast pace that capitalism demands of us and the same fast pace that weakens our movements and burns us out. A lot of the lessons that makes the CMC more accessible and welcoming to a wider variety of people are the same lessons that the ruling class still wants to learn. We've also already learned how to use the tools that will protect us from the coming bird flu pandemic, which has been called the monster at our door, as historian Mike Davis calls it, and has been knocking for quite a while now. It's the pandemic that's currently spreading throughout the animal agriculture industry and has infected 66 people in the US last year, and is currently threatening to make the jump to human transmission. But luckily we have N95s, air purifiers, ventilation, virtual and hybrid meetings, and mutual aid networks, which are all already standards at the CMC and can help us withstand a wide variety of natural or man-made disasters in the future. Currently there's work to be done with spreading that knowledge and making it more accessible to others in Gainesville. Another thing that kind of confuses people is our solidarity with homeless people. We know that homelessness is only going to increase as time goes on. The housing crisis will continue to get worse, and the ruling class isn't exactly just going to give away free housing and healthcare and stuff. So we have two options. We can either go with the status quo and let homeless people be dehumanized and antagonized as the city government plays whack-a-mole, sweeps encampments, and throws away people's belongings, and pushes them away from where we can see them and where they can be helped downtown. Or we can learn how to live together cooperatively, learn how to have relationships with homeless people that are not discriminatory or antagonistic, learn how to reduce their suffering and have reciprocal, mutually beneficial relationships. There's still a lot of work to be done in this matter, but I think we've done a lot in the past few years. So generally speaking, at the CMC, you have the opportunity to learn how to interact with other people whose lives are very different from yours. These are the things that can be challenging for people who don't have to deal with these struggles themselves, and more importantly, have been propagandized into thinking that these issues are irrelevant to them. People who represent and are benefited by the status quo in the US, particularly white people, middle-class people, including liberals and progressives. And it's easy for them to think that they have no problem, for example, with homeless people, but they'd just rather have them exist somewhere else where they have to deal with them. They might think that if people really need two-way masking to exist safely in public, then they should just stay home and not participate in society or at our events. Out of sight, out of mind, you know? And all of this is rooted in the logic of eugenics, the idea that somebody should exist more than others, and that some people shouldn't be part of the world that we share. The examples I've given weren't actions dictated by some authoritarian committee or coordinator. You can't point to any one person or group of people and say, that's the person responsible for all this. You're the person responsible for the mass requirements or the homeless people outside. And that's kind of the point of non-cybernetic understandings of organizations, where you have sort of tree with the president at the top and the managers in the middle and workers at the bottom, you know? It's just so that you can go up the chain, so you can find the person to blame, so you can punish them for the mistake, or so that you can praise them and give them a raise or whatever. But all these relationships of solidarity are the seemingly organic outgrowth of meta systems that are democratically operated, but still with room for improvement. So, generally speaking, people come to the CMC because they want to help reduce the suffering in the world and to connect with others who want to do the same, to learn about why things are the way that they are, why is the world suck so bad, you know, and how people have changed the course of history by working together. They get inspired and want to do something similar, so they start an organization or join a committee, and then that's the start of the dialectical feedback loop between learning and doing, theory and practice. Everyone in every organization has an influence on each other, whether that influence is perceptible or not. There's an interconnectedness of all things and actions, and as you do more and more political work and continue to reflect and study and learn from the past, that becomes more and more clear. And the laws that govern reality become easier to understand. Eventually, people will do things long enough or significant enough that it gets archived at places like the CMC or at SPOHP. And then we have events like this where we look back and learn from things so that we can know what to do together and move forward. So, recording history as it's happening is a very essential part of knowing what to do to change the future. And I really like how futuristic it can feel to be at the CMC in so many ways. I did not write a proper segue to the panelists, so if you'll do me a favor and please pretend that I gave a really good segue, I really appreciate that.
Can I say something for a second?
Sure. No?
It is, we are on a time frame.
Yes, well, it's Q&A at the end.
Okay.
I
ruling party, the ruling family, am going to clear this up. I, the ruling family, have taken all housing from the state. And I am giving housing, like I said, in 2012. And outside, I don't have homeless people outside. Federal definition for homeless is foreigners. Those that are not from here, renting, leasing, paying rent, couch service premium. These that came in 2014, these are hobo terrorists. They're here to kill people, rape, kill, and everything else. Everyone's spreading the FRM. Exactly. And yeah, I'm justified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a segue now. I have some bios for the panelists tonight from SPOHP, Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. All right. Okay. So first up we have Deborah, who I'm introducing. Deborah Hendrix is the Technical Coordinator and Archives Manager for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, SPOHP. She started as a volunteer in 2000 and found that she loved the work. After graduating from the University of Florida in 2006 with a degree in history, she became a full-time staff member of productions, of managing the recording of oral histories, both audio and video, teaching oral history, and curating the collections for preparation for final repository in the UF Digital Collections part of the library. Woohoo, Deborah! Thank you. Next we have Ronan Hart. Woohoo! Ronan Hart is the project coordinator of the Underground Railroad History Project, a partnership with the National Park Service Network to Freedom program. He got his start at SPOHP as a volunteer on the 2021 Mississippi Freedom Project research trip. He continued to work at SPOHP while earning his bachelor's and master's in history at UF, working on projects like the Veterans History Project, Challenging Racism at UF, the Florida Water Management Project, and more. His research interests concern the British anti-slavery movement, Irish nationalism, and American abolitionism. In June 2024, he returned to SPOHP full-time for the Underground Railroad History Project. All right, Ronan. All right, and then we have Beckett right here. Beckett Price is the inaugural Gulf Scholars Oral History Fellow who helps coordinate the Pensacola Environmental History Project, SPOHP's current student-oriented experiential learning initiative. Beckett joined SPOHP last spring as an undergraduate intern for the Underground Railroad Project, then joined the Pensacola Project when it began in June. He researches the history of protest in the Florida Atlantic with a particular focus on Black Florida and the environment. Cool beans, Beckett. All right, last but not least, Heather Halick over here, our moderator for tonight. Thank you so much. Heather Halick is the owner of Third House Books. Yeah. Woo-hoo, Third House Books! She has served as a CMC board member since 2018 and is a former employee of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. At SPOHP, she worked as an audit editor and primarily worked on the two collections, the African American History Project and the Art of Aging Project. She is also a graduate of the University of Florida with a bachelor's in English and linguistics. So that's who we're dealing with tonight. And thank you again so much for coming. Thank you, Sloan, for speaking, and also to the gentleman left. And I think that the format of this is going to be, we have questions prepared, and we're going to go through those. Heather's going to ask those, and we're going to have a cool conversation. And then if there's time left until 8, we're going to do an audience Q&A. So thank you very much, everyone, again. And let's get it. Oh, there's a presentation we're going to look at.
Thanks for the introduction. Oh, is this on? Is this on? Oh my God. Oh, now we're there. Thank you for the introduction, Rebecca, and thank you, Sloan, for the opening remarks. Before we get to discussion questions, this is a quick presentation about SPOHP's archives and how to actually access them. Because in the office, we're always talking about how amazing all these interviews and everything that we do is, and then we realize that a lot of people don't actually know how to look at them. So, could you slide, Lee? This is our website, slide. That's a drop-down menu with the project directory. This is project directory. This is the best place to just see what we have, and they're organized with this little menu by theme, and there's a whole ton of them. But if you actually want to listen to them, can you slide? Go to UF Digital Collections, where you can search in the SPOHP collection, and that's where most of them are actually housed. And we have one that is in the digital collections that we're going to listen to a little clip from. Can you slide? Do you want to introduce Bob Palmer?
Yeah. Oh. Hello? Okay. So Dr. Bob Palmer gave us an interview in 2022 for the Florida Naturalist Oral History Project. And this project is seeking to trace folks from across the state who are engaged in environmental activism and advocacy. And he's going to talk a little bit about the Superfund site here in Gainesville. He and a number of other folks were engaged in trying to lobby the people who own the site. And if you're not familiar with Superfund sites, they are places where industrial contamination has essentially rendered the land on which a factory has sat totally unusable. So there's one that's right across the street from Ward's in Gainesville, and Dr. Bob Palmer chatted with us among a number of other topics in his career about this Superfund site and the advocacy that they were doing to try to get safer chemicals used at the site. And it was actively in operation, treating railroad ties, telephone poles, all that kind of thing. So it was treating wood with these really harmful chemicals to the environment. And he's talking about the activity in Gainesville that essentially got the plant shut down. So we can.
The video's on the next slide.
Yeah.
I also went to the city commission, which refused to do anything because they run GRU and they didn't want to, ruffle any feathers. A bunch of op-eds followed in the Gainesville Sun, really embarrassing GRU, and I think, and embarrassing the city government, that the city government was supposedly very concerned about this plume of pollution moving toward their water source. At the same time, they were buying poles and subsidizing this business that was creating more of the same problem. So GRU was, I think, highly embarrassed. Interestingly, within 6 months after that campaign, they shut down the facility. They stopped. And I think it had something to do with us. I think the customers went to them and said, we don't want the CCA anymore, we're getting too much heat. They actually shut down the facility, which is great, because now they have an empty facility they can clean up, which they've been doing now for 6 or 8 years. And I think it's a much safer situation.
Next slide. So the UF Digital Collections is like the very permanent archive where the stuff that's up there is not going anywhere. It also takes a very long time to get stuff there, and it kind of is horrible to use in some ways. But the good news is pretty much everything that we do also goes up on YouTube, which can happen very quickly because Deborah works very hard around the clock all the time to make it happen. So, and we have many, many playlists with a lot of these collections and interviews, as well as events that we film, that Deborah films, like this one. We have a camera back there. This will probably be on the YouTube page in the future. You want to go next slide? And on the YouTube page, you can find other things. So this is from 2017. If anyone was in Gainesville, then you might remember that Richard Spencer came to have a speaking engagement at UF, neo-Nazi Richard Spencer. And there was a massive outcry and protest movements. And were you there for filming these?
No.
Okay. But some people from SPOHP went to the protests to record short interviews.
I prepared all the students to go, but I had to stay back and man the fort.
Yeah, fair enough. So here's just one of those quick interviews. If you could play this one, please. This intro is some great B-roll. How many of you were here at this? Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Hey. I'm sorry. I'm just going to start it.
All right.
I'm with the Samuel Proctor Rural History Program. Do you give your consent to have your interview in the public archive?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell me your name?
My name's Lanier Phillips. That's Lanier, Lanier, Phillips. I came out here today to basically stand in unity with everybody else. You know, for years, not even years, for centuries, we've been oppressed, and basically I came out here today because I'm tired of my mom and my dad and everybody saying be careful when you go outside, or be careful when you go to the store, not because of fear of peers, but fear of authority figures, of people who think that they have a better life or a better understanding of this world because of their color of the skin or what their beliefs are. So I came out here today alone, met up with a couple friends that came out here alone, basically just to stand with our people as a people in unity. You know, we might not all be out here for the same thing or the same beliefs, but we all out here. You know, you stand for something, you die for anything, and I'm out here to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
How do you feel about Richard Spencer coming?
And then one more of these. Deb, do you want to introduce this one?
Okay, so, we also take field trips, and we have our favorite, I guess our flagship field trip is going to Mississippi to record civil rights veterans. In this case, we were in Natchez, Mississippi, but we crossed the Mississippi River, and we went all the way into Louisiana to Jonesville, where we found a deacon of defense. And now, you don't just walk in the community and people say, oh, there's a deacon of defense, would you like to interview him? This took years of coming back and gaining trust of the community, and that's one of the things that we do. So here we are. We drove, I don't know, it's about a 2-hour drive in Louisiana. And yeah, this is a really striking piece, and this man was just amazing. So I was there.
And what is a deacon of defense?
Oh, a deacon of defense is, I guess you would call it the Secret Service of the movement. They were secret. You'll hear him say that he didn't even tell his wife what he was doing, and she knew better than to ask. And they would, in some cases, and in a lot of cases, they'd be the ones protecting Martin Luther King when he was around or in the crowd. But you would never see that. But these guys were prepared to do what it took. I mean, this was serious. They were not peaceful. They were not. So anyway, you're going to hear one. It's pretty striking, I think.
Yeah, we wore the uniform just like, and we never said nothing about it or what we were going to do. We got together, the deacons did, and we decided what we were going to do. That's the reason why it was so hard to get into the deacon, because we were more secret than the Ku Klux Klan were. What we were going to do, we done it. We didn't go talk about it. If I went to a meeting and come back, my wife didn't ask me nothing about it because I wasn't going to tell her.
Okay.
And if I got ready to go out to do something, I remember they had the largest Ku Klux Klan convention right out here between here and Hodge paper mill.
Between here and where?
Hodge, where the paper mill is.
Yes.
It's about 2 miles from here.
Okay.
They had big convention down there, and they got several days getting ready for it. And they cut out a gum tree about this big around, and I guess it was probably 30 foot tall. And they cut
gum tree?
A gum tree. And they made a cross out of it. They wrapped that gum tree in crocus burlap, as y'all call it, and put some kind of diesel fuel or something on it anyway. But they stood it up there, and that was a symbol. Okay, so when the meeting got started, they lit the cross. But we knowing what the cross was representing when they put it up there. So me and one of the other guys got together. I got my brother. I wouldn't go in one of my vehicles. I got a high-power rifle with an infrared scope on it. Other guy, he got up there next to the road and laid down. Well, I could see him, and he was letting me know when there's traffic and all this stuff. And I was back there on the railroad track laying down with a high-power rifle. When the meeting got started, he let me know it was time to shoot. I shot the arms off that cross. In about 15 minutes, wasn't nobody out there. Yeah. So
you did what?
I shot the arms off that cross. I had infrared scope on it at night. Infrared scope. Shot the arms off that cross. Shooting a 30-30 at Winchester. Huh?
While it was burning?
While it was burning. Yeah. Yeah.
And what happened?
They dismissed. About 15 minutes, there wasn't nobody out there.
So you broke up a Ku Klux Klan rally?
Oh yeah, sure
That's
did.
what you're telling me.
I sure did.
I feel like that's one of the best ones that we have, period. And it really shows what community oral history means. So.
And there's actually a little more to that. I will say that he took us in the back room and showed us the rifle, but we were not allowed to take pictures of it. But we did. We took a picture, a group picture. Which you can see if you come by, but we cannot publish that.
Next slide. And one last clip just to highlight that SPOHP and the CMC have a long and great storied relationship, and we've been coming here to help out when we can. Here's a little film screening and a Q&A that happened about a COINTELPRO documentary from back in 2010. Could you play?
Hi everyone. Welcome to the Civic Media Center. We're really happy to have you all out here today. Can I just get a quick show of hands? Who has not been to the Civic Media Center before? Okay, quite a few of you. So we are an independent library and meeting space. We partner with the community a lot and have really awesome radical events like this. We have documentaries every Monday. We usually have at least one live show with local music a week. Today, after this event at 6:30, we're having a fundraiser called Springboard at the Matheson with Colleen Crowley as a special guest. Most of the people that you're going to see here staffing are volunteers. I'm a volunteer. The way we keep our doors open is through community donations, so I am going to pass the box around. Whatever you can give would be great. It'll help us keep our lights on. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she will introduce the video.
Next slide. Yeah, a little presentation. Happy Valentine's Day. Yep, that's all.
Okay. Okay, just coming up here. Okay, thanks.
Is this on? Is this on? I don't know if it is. Yeah, could you help me? Sorry.
No, you're totally good.
Check.
Check it again.
Yeah.
It's working now. Okay. I just want to say before I ask these questions, it is such an honor to be here tonight on behalf of the CMC and also as a former SPOHP employee. SPOHP is such a wonderful place. I was talking to Ronan about how it's one of those places where you walk in and you can just assume that everybody's on the same page about local history. And it was really rad to transcribe interviews about things as far back as shootings in St. Augustine during the segregation era and things that people have been historically afraid to talk about. SPOHP really is amazing at providing a safe space for people, and I think the CMC is also excellent at doing that, so it's really an honor to be talking on behalf of both my experiences, and I have a few questions to kind of get us started, because I think a lot of people don't really know how an oral history project works or how that starts. So my first question is, how does an oral history program begin? What necessitates the collection of certain stories? We have several posters here from protests here in Gainesville, And SPOHP has documented short interviews from the 2022 Won't Back Down Ben Sass protests, the 2021 Impacted Families March on Washington against police brutality, the 2019 Boycott Wendy's protest, the 2017 Women's March on Washington, and the 2017 No Nazis at UF protests against Richard Spencer, which we just saw an interview from. How does SPOHP decide which protests or local events to document, and why is it important to have multiple mediums preserved from local protests? I'm sorry, that's a loaded, long question, so.
You want to try that first?
Well, for one thing, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program is completely student-driven. So it's the students, for the most part, that come up with these ideas, and we followed through with it, and especially the protests. Now, protests are not exactly oral history. They are not. But they do supplement our existing interviews or collections. So basically, a student, they get ideas, and they quickly build a team, and of course, we tell them, the best practices for proceeding. We're always going to need technology, always, for this to record it. You have to record it, or it didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. So that's really the genesis of almost all of the oral history, collections, especially the protests. And that was such a dynamic time, I have to say, that COVID came and kind of were resetting, I would say. But that's how they generally started, with the protest with students. And now, I mean, it varies. For instance, for the Underground Railroad, that was just literally the National Park Service calling us and saying, "Hey, we need this done." Okay, we're there, we'll do it. So it varies quite a bit.
Yeah. I would say a project's definitely necessitated by when temporally bound in that the people that you need to talk to might die like at any moment. And if anyone in here has thought, oh, I should really interview this relative, my grandparent, do it. Like, do it soon. Don't keep putting it off. We were meant to talk to a gentleman last fall in November, December, who was a veteran who served in the European theater of World War II, and then the interview got pushed back a week because he had a fall, and then pushed back another week, and then he passed away before we got to talk to him. Okay. So don't wait. That's really what necessitates an oral history project, is the time limit on it. And I guess that's the same with the protest, is it's only going to happen that one time. You're only going to get all of those people there that one time, and you have to be able to seize that opportunity. I think that's something that makes oral history very unique.
Right.
Do you have anything
I have very little to add. Because I'm also sort of the youngest person on this little panel here. But I think it's very important to think about how the students, Deborah, you say, really are the lifeblood of the program. I think that because they are doing, those hours of labor, putting the thought into a project, going out and actually talking to people even before the interview to try to make connections in the community. And it's a really important way to build those community building skills for students. To learn how to talk to strangers. All of those important sort of life skills that you don't get in the classroom, that you don't get necessarily from your parents at home. I think they're very, very, that's a very important part of the creation of an oral history project, especially if you are working with students.
Thank you so much. When you're conducting interviews, obviously you're collecting sensitive information that's tied to people's names and historical events that could put people at risk when talking about these things. What principles guide how SPOHP conducts interviews, and how do you know you've collected enough to complete a collection? I know that's loaded, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, there are principles in oral history. I think a lot of people don't actually know what oral history is.
Right.
But basically, it's memories and reflections. And that means our narrators, we call them narrators, we don't call them subjects or anything like that. Whatever they say, how they remember it is the truth. That is what we're recording, and that's what we want. Unnaturally, if if you're going to publish in some sort of academic journal, you might fact check, but you're not ever going to say, don't say that because it wasn't true. Just leave that to the wife sitting in the corner. Don't do that. But there are principles. One of them is we don't talk about like health issues or things like that that would require an IRB, which is Institution Review Board. So we don't need IRB for oral history. There's a whole code of ethics, naturally. A lot of it is just keeping silent during the interview and not putting your 2 cents worth in, because it's all about them and not you. And that's one of the primary things. And creating a very safe space to speak. Those are kind of our guiding principles, I would say. But as far as privacy, now this is getting to be a really hot issue in the whole Oral History Association. And with AI, this is a tough, we don't have any answers for that yet. But we just avoid really sensitive, we don't ask where they live. If they don't want to give their date of birth, that's something we used to ask all the time. We'll just, it was kind of not put that in there. Although really, anybody can get anyone's date of birth in about 2 seconds. But, and many more best practices. But yeah, we don't just let people go out and ask questions. So we do have guidelines, yeah.
I think all the best lessons I've learned about oral history came from Deborah, and it's what you just heard and a whole lot else about just respecting the people that you're talking to and having a lot of appreciation for being in community with them and having the honor of receiving someone's story, because it's a lot of trust that someone is putting on you when they're willing to trust you with their story. So it's trying to hold up our end of the bargain and do that interview the best we can and take care of it and not misuse it by letting it be fed into an AI algorithm to train a large language model. So.
And I also think that it's important to know that your narrator has an agenda. The people who you're interviewing have their own motivation for doing that interview and for speaking with you. And I especially think that's important to consider as a university-sponsored oral history program. People are not going to want to talk to someone who's affiliated with a gigantic flagship university, especially if they've had really bad experiences with institutions, with scholarship, with research. There's a lot of trauma wrapped up in that trust that we're talking about. And I think that's a very important part of learning how to work with the community, is accepting that you are an outsider sometimes, and that is just as far as you're going to get.
Thank you. I was looking through your slides and noticed collections I didn't even notice when I was at SPOHP, and SPOHP has so many collections. Y'all are really great at getting involved in various communities. Beckett, you had worked on the Pensacola Environmental History Project, which ties in other themes from the Gulf Coast climate crisis and the Florida Naturalist Oral History Project. How do you relate the work from those projects to your current work with the Pensacola Environmental History Project?
That's a really good question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot as I am continuing to work on the Pensacola project. So the person who inspired the Pensacola project was Gulf Scholars Coordinator Rebecca Burton. The Gulf Scholars program at UF is trying to get students from all disciplines engaged in research, work on the Gulf, and trying to save our Gulf shores and communities. It's really interesting work. and Becca was born in Pensacola. So we've been focusing on the connections that she has there to be try to sort of document this history of community activism that has sort of risen up in these around these Superfund sites. Pensacola has 7 Superfund sites. And I was going through the collections a few weeks ago and just sort of looking at all of the various collections that could relate to the Pensacola project. So SPOHP has a ton of environmental projects, primarily focusing on documenting sort of the ecological history of Florida, and then also the history of environmental activism in Florida. And so I was looking for connections between Pensacola and Gainesville, but also Pensacola and all of these other places along the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic Coast where really heavy industry has polluted the environment. And I came across that interview with Dr. Palmer, and that's one of relatively few interviews that was focused on Gainesville and environmental activism in Gainesville. And I was really interested in seeing that these communities are doing the same work all over the state. And they are doing this work almost in isolation sometimes from other communities who really, I mean, building those connections between people who are doing this sort of work is something that's really hard, because who the hell is going to go out there and talk to a bunch of different people and be like, do you know what a Superfund site is? Like, it's not like sexy work. And I think that it's something that is getting more prevalent, and I really am hoping that this kind of documentation that SPOHP is doing will enable communities to see the work that is occurring all over the state that is mirroring their own work. And especially, you know, I'm hoping to see that sort of grow along the coasts in the next few years.
Amazing. Ronan, do you have any examples of like past projects influencing your current work that you can talk about?
Well, first I would say that we just call it the Gulf to avoid controversy.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, yeah, you're dead on. That's a good question. I think definitely you mentioned the Challenging Racism at UF project, and that started at the beginning of 2022, I believe, which was when I had been at SPOHP for a little less than a year and was starting to feel kind of comfortable in doing more than just transcribing, which was still most of my job.
Right,
but that's when I kind of became comfortable doing more than that, and that project started, and Dr. Ortiz had me and some other students and really elevated us into not quite leadership positions, but I mean, having more autonomy and working on a project like that looking back in the, that was still the Kent Fox era, first Kent Fox era, and it's just feels so impossible now, looking back at this project that was funded by UF to put on public programs to examine the history of racism and the ongoing current racism faced by students and faculty and staff at the University of Florida. So that, to me, kind of stands out as like what the kind of thing that SPOHP can do that no one else in the University of Florida could have done on that scale. And even if it becomes less likely that we would get funding from UF to do something like that, it kind of sticks out in my mind as the goal. What we should be striving for is something that bold and radical.
So my next question is kind of about that, like the challenges. What are the challenges of running oral history projects? What is the process for making this information accessible and reachable to scholars and also community historians?
Yeah, there's a million ways to approach that. Do you want to go, Deborah?
Well, that is the goal. That is the holy grail, I would say, is to make it accessible. There's a lot of barriers to that. But one thing, it's a long, long process to get from interview to public. You wouldn't think there would be, but there is naturally, because we have to do transcripts. We have to get it ingested into the library with a lot of metadata.
Yup.
You don't just drop it in there. It would be nice, but that's not the way it is. So we are constantly looking for ways, constantly looking. We don't sit on our hands over there. We're not like the normal historian.
Right.
We're active historians, I guess. But we are constantly looking for ways to get it out, to get the information out there. Through teachers. Well, now that's another issue, isn't it? We can't even get into the public schools now.
Right.
But there's ways, there's still ways to do it. There's still ways. So we concentrate on those kind of ways. That the community helps us too, by the way, do that a lot. Like the Cotton Club Museum out there. Look at them. They're just going gangbusters out there. And they're doing exactly this. Putting this knowledge for their youth. But they're not going to get that in the classroom, that's for sure.
Right.
So they are providing it, and a lot comes from us. So there's that. It's just an ongoing struggle, but it just makes us all the more determined, I would say, because you just can't have people not knowing the truth.
Exactly.
You just can't. So.
There are many other challenges of oral history that we could talk about at length. I mean, just storage and it's expensive, and we have so many old cassette tapes because the SPOHP has been around since the 60s and they were not using digital recording back then, and those tapes break down and wear out, and I've learned more than I would have possibly guessed ever in my life that I would have learned about physical media storage and the process of digitizing that stuff and trying to keep these things that were recorded and that, someone took the time to make that recording, but it could be lost all over again if we don't raise the money to take it to a place that can digitize it for us.
Yeah, I definitely, labor and money are the two great beasts that we are always fighting to overcome. And I think that, like Deborah said, it's you just don't realize how much work goes into every single aspect of an interview with somebody. And it's not just the process of recording the interview and then putting on all the metadata and getting it through the UFDC. It's thinking about what are you going to do after that's done. How are you going to stay in contact with this person who you've probably had a fairly intimate experience with? How is the project going to progress over time? When are you going to stop doing interviews on a project? A lot of that is very dependent on, are there people who are willing to go out and do that labor? And is there money to fund the labor and the equipment and all of that? So it's highly dependent on those two factors.
Yeah. Like a work of art, an oral history collection is never finished but abandoned.
Yeah, the physical media thing is something I didn't think about often, but that reminds me of, I don't know if you're familiar with William Basinski and like the disintegration loops on 9/11. It's a music project, but he recorded these decaying tapes digitally as like the 9/11 attacks happened to be happening across the street, or not, like he was in Brooklyn and he could see what was happening in Manhattan. But that was like the one thing that made me very aware of the decay of physical media in a very real way. And it's sad to think about things just like sitting in storage and not getting processed, and mostly because of like how many processes are involved with getting in the UFDC trenches, it's not fun.
Yeah.
This is kind of a sub-question to the first, but it's, what is SPOHP's reaction to the federal freeze on funds? Does this affect the mission of social justice-based research?
Oh man, my perspective as this comes from the fact that I'm on this Underground Railroad project, which is federally funded by the National Park Service, and so it weighs on us heavily.
Right.
It seems like that project is safe. Kind of, we have the money, and the National Park Service themselves haven't yet been like targeted in this, but it definitely weighs on us, and it's exactly the kind of project that the current Trump administration would definitely cut if they were able to do now. But it really only tells us that we need to redouble our efforts on doing exactly what we have been doing, because there's this push to stop this kind of thing.
Right.
It doesn't change anything about our mission, but forces us to maybe get more creative about how we achieve that mission.
Actually, that's a good example of SPOHP in action with the National Park Service. Okay, there's a possibility, yes, that the funding's going to get cut, but we have decided that we're going to do it anyway. We're going to do it anyway, and the Underground Railroad is a history that's not very well known. So we're going to start with local descendants, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah.
Plenty of them. Now we're down way down in the south, so most of the Underground Railroad history is up north, but not too much is down here in the south. So we're really excited about kind of taking on, and this is a good example of how SPOHP works. And it's not going to be hard at all to find students interested in this.
No, definitely not.
So that's our kind of working plan right now.
Amazing. Did you want to go ahead, Beckett?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. My last question is more of a fun one. What are some projects you're currently working on that you're excited about?
I mean, I could go on and on about the Underground Railroad project, which is, to me, just so exciting.
Yeah.
Having been a part of it, even before all the federal funding stuff, it was kind of a mess in a lot of ways. So it has been delayed and detained. But when we do get the chance to interview people who are the descendants of people who were involved with the Underground Railroad, either as people who escaped via the Underground Railroad or were station masters or conductors, those interviews, I got to do a couple years ago at this point in like 2023. But those are just the most incredible interviews, because it's really talking to people who know their stuff. Like, they are the family historian who has done all the research and gone through all the court documents and family trees and the genealogy, and they know so much, and they're so eager to connect it to their education and how they were taught Black history when they were growing up, but they were taught in a way that doesn't at all reflect the actual history that their family experienced.
Right.
So those have been just absolutely my favorite interviews to do. You barely have to say anything. Like, these people will just, left alone, they'll just go and go. So I hope I get to do more of them, but we'll see how that goes.
I mean, I've already plugged the Pensacola Environmental History Project, but I went on a trip to Apalachicola in May with Deborah and former SPOHPer Donovan Carter, who's now he's at Howard, I believe, right? Yeah, he's in law school way up north, and we spoke with the descendants of some folks who escaped from Fort Negro in Apalachicola during the at the very start of the First Seminole War. We spoke with people who had just this incredible wealth of cultural knowledge, and that was really eye-opening. That was the first oral history project I had been on. It's called the Big Bend Oral History Project. It's absolutely amazing. It's only like 4 interviews, but we went to the opening of the Negro Fort in, I can't remember what national forest it is. Apalachicola National Forest? Okay. And yeah, that was just really incredible. A great project.
I'll say, if you have any interest in the Underground Railroad in Florida, I'll plug that on February 20th in Library East, Dr. Larry Rivers, who's a great historian who wrote wonderful books about the Underground Railroad in Florida, is going to have a speaking event with his son, who's also a historian, and it's going to be both of them up there. So come to that on the 20th, I think 6 p.m. Flo is nodding. She knows. Thank you.
Miss Deborah, did you have any projects you're excited about?
Well, all projects never die, I will say.
Oh, yeah.
They're just temporarily, they're taking a nap. But, gosh, so many. I think I'll have to mention that one of the things that we're doing right now is going back to our older projects, even before, before 2008, that's when everything was on tape. And we are going back and putting all of those now, we're putting them all up on the UFDC. And revisiting those projects has been amazing. One of them that Ronan has been working on, it's not up yet, it's just going to be though soon, very, very soon. It's called Mommy Speaks. And that is just so powerful, but it's about incarcerated mothers in Lowell Prison. And that was a tough one to get.
Yeah.
But we have that, and that's going to be up on the UFDC, I'm going to guess, in about a month. And just so many others that are older, and the history of the Bahamas, Luther Island on the Bahamas, that's coming up. Things like what you just saw, the CMC, the COINTELPRO, that's going up very, very soon. We're revisiting all these old projects that we really didn't have the infrastructure to get up. So, but it's all coming thanks to Ronan and a couple of other people. That's all we do now. We just churn them out.
Yeah, Deborah, tell them about the trip to Fort Pierce.
Thank you for that. Was so long ago, but it was only last April, I think. Okay, so we had a student from Brazil. Through Flo back there is our librarian for Zornil Hurston, I think, right?
Yeah.
One of them. Well, this lady, student from Brazil, was going to have to go back. She was going to have to go back to Brazil. She was only here for one semester, and she was studying Zornil Hurston. In Brazil. And she wanted to go. She had this trip all planned. She didn't have a car or anything. So we just got in the car and drove on down to Fort Pierce. There were 4 of us. And we used this little camera right here on a stick. And we recorded the whole thing. And it is now on the UFDC, I think.
Amazing.
So it was, so you might not know that Zornil Hurston is buried in Fort Pierce, not Eatonville.
Right.
Not Eatonville. And that's where she passed away. And we just spent the whole day, and we recorded the whole day like a documentary. And it was just fantastic. And Carolina spoke in Portuguese in a lot of the places that we stopped. And so we didn't even know what she said for a long time. But we got it translated. That was a fantastic day. Yeah, that was very memorable. So thanks for reminding me, Flo.
That's amazing. I'm jealous that she got a Miss Deborah road trip. That's so fun. I wrapped up with my questions, and Rebecca, did you want to help with the Q&A? Basically, we are limited on the SPOHP mics, and this is going to be transcribed by someone at SPOHP, so I will be repeating the question that somebody asked so that SPOHP is able to transcribe this more easily.
I appreciate it. I also wanted to let people know that it is 8 p.m., so this has been really wonderful, and thank you so much, everyone here. But if you don't want to stick around, you're sleepy, feel free to bid the night adieu or the day adieu, I don't know. But yeah, if you have any questions, then let's stick around and keep talking. It looks like Jimmy's got a question.
Yeah.
All right.
Get it on there.
So I want to let everyone in this room know that the Civic Media Center has its own little oral history archive. It is a collection of cassette tapes that were recorded at events all around Gainesville, many of them in this space and the previous 2 Civic Media Center spaces. And many of them are, so they're not strict actual oral history in the official sense that SPOHP practices, right? Because they're not interviews necessarily, although some of them are interview format, but they're public events like this, recorded onto cassette tape, a lot of them by Joe Corder and other people who were founders and early organizers with the Civic Media Center. Many of them are public meetings and things like that, but a lot of them are either officially part of or similar to a series of events that we used to host at the Civic Media Center called First-Hand History Talks, where an individual who had been part of a movement or an organization or both that was instrumental in making fundamental social change spoke from their personal lived experience of doing that organizing, how it impacted their life, how it changed their life, how it changed the world around them. And so we've got material on labor, civil rights, the women's movement, I'm blanking out, LGBTQIA movement, et cetera, eco folks, you know, any issue you could think of. And in 2009, we started digitizing those audio cassettes. And then I believe it was 2010 to 2012, we worked with Deborah and the folks at SPOHP, and we actually got some of the ones that had like more official oral history value to them, the digital copies over to them, and they're archived in the UF archives. There is a hard drive up in the storage space behind the coordinator's office here at the CMC somewhere that contains the rest of those digitized files, and we still have all the audio cassettes too. And that is a project that could be picked back up again, and I've been talking to a couple folks around the center these days, but I just want to encourage anyone who's a CMC volunteer, or if you're passionate about oral history and passionate about what the Civic Media Center does and how it acts as a street library and a street archive and repository for people's movement history, to get involved and help us do that again. And to the SPOHP folks, if there's any way that we could restart that partnership, once we get our shit together on this side, I would love to see it. It was a project that was dear to my heart when I was on staff here from 2008 to 2012, and I would love to see it come back. We need that people's history, we need that movement history more now than ever, and you know, the people that are now in charge of the levers of power in this country would love nothing more than to erase that history. They're actively working to erase it. We must actively work and fight to preserve it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's talk after this.
I don't know if I can like summarize all of that. Jim,
I think it's fine.
do you think the mic got it?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
If not, I'll repeat it again.
No, it's okay.
For you on a different mic later.
Yeah, that sounds really incredible. I would love to take a listen to that, and we can discuss further.
Lee?
I think Lee's question.
I have a question. Hi, my name's Lee. As I was doing research to prepare for this event and learn more about SPOHP and get it rolling, I actually saw that the LGBTQ oral history collection has been removed from the UF digital collections archive. Like, nothing can be found on there. At least the one I looked last. And I just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay, that's my question.
Do you know anything about
No, I never. I'll find out tomorrow.
Okay, I'm going to repeat it.
Yeah, we
back into the mic. So Lee noticed that the LGBTQ collections page was taken off from the SPOHP website.
Not the SPOHP website, but the UFDC.
The UFDC, so the UF collections.
Digital collections.
Yeah.
We have friends. We have friends in the UF. We'll see about that.
I wanted you to know.
Yeah. I don't know if it's technically the same project as that, but we have one of our students at SPOHP, Lauren Manso, is doing a Florida queer history project. Lately, her and some of her other students asked her to be on this panel tonight, but she couldn't make it, unfortunately. But she would have told us all about that and the ongoing collection of queer oral history interviews. So if someone dropped the ball, it wasn't us, and we'll look into that. Yeah.
I just wanted you guys to be aware of that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can just hand them this mic. It would be much.
My question is about what you can lose when you transcribe oral history. So my understanding is that when you're doing an interview with someone, you're recording like what they're saying, but to me, you're also recording like their accent, what's going on in the background, the cadence of their voice, all of that. And I think that's what makes oral history very exciting and important. So I wonder how you try to preserve that when you are transcribing an interview.
That's a very, very good question, and it's something that if you transcribe, you have wrestled with like endlessly of how to preserve the nuances of what someone is saying, and it kind of depends what your goal is when you're transcribing, but there's really no solution or no answer at all. My thinking with transcription is more that it's like a research aid, like to make something more searchable and more accessible. But if you are working with an oral history, for whatever reason, you're writing a book or whatever, you have to listen to it because there is so much lost. There is so much lost when it's transcribed. So a transcription is helpful, but the recording of the audio is really, that is the oral history. Like that is the most important part.
Yeah, I just want to add that SPOHP has a style guide as well that we're using when we transcribe that gets updated every few years. And that sort of outlines the various guidelines that you're using. And our transcripts go through 3 levels of transcription. So there's the first draft, and then it goes through a second round of editing called an audit edit, and then a final edit. And that is 3 different people look at the transcript over the course of its creation. So it is not just one person's responsibility. It's a collective effort to as accurately as possible get sort of a sound or video recording onto a page. But of course, the video and the audio are where, like Ronan was talking about, where that oral history really comes alive, and it's necessary, I think, to watch the video.
So speaking about like the visual and the sound of people's voices, but like also accessibility. How can you best, apart from the transcript, like translate that for people who cannot hear or see? And like, what are the accessibility measures for that?
I'm going to repeat the question. So the question is about accessibility measures with transcribing and audio when you have folks who cannot speak or cannot see or hear. Is that what you said? Okay. Yeah.
I think that people who, that's a very interesting question, maybe something that we could be discussing more at SPOHP, but I think for people that can't see, oral history is probably great as just the recording itself as something to listen to. In terms of people with hearing issues, I think this is somewhere that, I mean, we were kind of ragging on AI earlier, but it is true in a sense that there are AI tools that can allow for pretty solid automatic transcription of audio files. So if something has not already been transcribed by us for someone's use, there are starting to be more and more tools and better tools that can assist someone in rendering like an audio file readable for them. So Descript is the one that we use in our office, but there's lots more of these. So thank you for that question.
How can students who are interested in oral history get involved?
Some students just start a club. So that's a great one, the Oral History Club. I can put you in contact or Beckett can. That's one great way. There's an internship offered every semester also that like gets filled up almost immediately. So if you're an undergrad student and you want to take the internship, you gotta be there like 8 a.m. on the dot to register for it. So there will be another one in the fall, but staying involved with the club will be one great way. They're trying to move from just having their meetings to start doing like field work and actually going places and helping out SPOHP that way. So thank you for that.
I also want to add, I'm vice president of the Oral History Club, so if you're interested, please come talk to me.
I forgot that. Sorry.
I want to add that SPOHP is a public office, and you are welcome to come in, whether you are doing research or not. It is one of the safest places on campus. It's sort of my home away from home when I'm not in my classes. So yeah, that's another way to get involved, is literally just come and talk to us.
Yeah. If you want to start a project, if you want to interview someone, we can train you, we can give you equipment, and just like facilitate you making that happen. So.
You have work study money to hire students?
Not, do you know?
You know, we're in a peculiar situation right now that we don't have a director. I'm sure a lot of you in here knew Paul or know Paul Ortiz, and he's abandoned us to go to Cornell. I don't know. Anyway, so we're going to revitalize all that. Right now, no. Yeah, that's the short answer.
I'll just hand it back. Do you guys ever interact with other oral history programs for support, like with digitizing or manpower or anything like that?
Well, we had some of us had a lot of fun in Cincinnati at the Oral History Association conference this last October, and that was great, because I really haven't met a lot of people in other oral history programs. So that was a lot of fun to meet people who are, and meet people who are, like, for instance, doing things with AI that are like way beyond what we do, and way more like granular and interesting and exciting. So yes, but we could do more, would be my opinion.
And I just want to add, there's actually no two oral history programs alike.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is simple. It's just resources, and you have to use what you have. And that's why they're different in that way. But the practices are pretty much the same, I would say. Now, the Oral History Association that Ronan just mentioned, that is our guiding, that is our association that we are all follow the guidelines for and contribute. But that's where we meet once a year, and we put our heads together and lament about how much money we don't have. But yeah, that's it's the resources what it comes down to.
I want to add that sometimes, oral history programs are sort of few and far between. If you haven't noticed, they are not the most common, and SPOHP is really Florida's sort of premier institutional oral history program. But we work with people who are practitioners of oral history, who are independent, who are affiliated with an institution without programs all the time. So we work with these contacts, especially I'm thinking of Dr. Jamin Wells. He's been helping us with the Pensacola Project. He is an oral historian who doesn't have an associated program, who works out of University of West Florida. So there are lots of sort of smaller contacts and connections that oral history programs will make in order to sort of carry out their daily activities in fieldwork.
Can y'all tell us a little bit about the logistics of organizing, say, like preparation and then during the ongoing interviews? And then particularly, I'm interested in like the compiling of the final collection before sharing it. But like the logistics of organizing all of this. I'm imagining it's so much data, so many files that are going through so many hands. Like, yeah.
I'm not even sure where to start on that. No, it does start with an idea, I will say. And the idea has to be fleshed out, and generally start with a question guide. That's a really good way to refine your thoughts about what you want to do. And from there, we'll just skip over the part, is there going to be any funding for it or anything like that, because that's just such a wide range of permutation. I can't go there. But let's just say, okay, and we have everything that someone would need to go record it. And by the way, just aside, if you wanted to do an oral history, of course we'd have to train you a little bit, but you can do an oral history borrowing our equipment, with one caveat: it must go in the collection. And I think that's fair. So anyway, it's just a whole process. You do the interview. We skip over the part about pre-interview and all that stuff. There's a lot of steps to it, and then come back and we process it into an archival format, I would say. So it's not going to be, we have to have titling and all of that. That has to go in there. We can't just take raw footage and put it, or raw audio for that matter. So it all has to be, and then we have to make sure that we're looking at the principals too. Did they say something that they get really comfortable?
Yes.
Really comfortable. So we do go over for that as well. In the meantime, we're getting the transcript going and all of this. But usually it is the recording that gets to the UFDC first. Just for this, we can get that pretty quickly. So and then we have to depend on the library. We are a standalone oral history program, but we have to put it in the library. We can't do it. We can't do that. So it's just a long process. And then even when it gets to the library, even then we have to make a lot of very unique decisions about how do we handle this, because they're all kind of different. How do we handle this or that problem? For instance, we have an interview right now. I'm still unclear about how we're going to do this with Lacey Harwell, who was interviewed over 2 days, and there's, I don't know what, 10 hours of recording.
More.
More. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to listen to a 10-hour recording. But anyway, things like that. So I'm not too ashamed to say that some of these have been decades before they're out. But we're getting pretty fast at it now, I'd say. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's not really a good answer, but it is what it is.
I think that's a great answer. I think we're gonna wrap up because it is a little late. I know, Miss Deborah, you get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. So we're gonna wrap up. If y'all have any other questions, I recommend emailing SPOHP or even stopping by the office. As a former SPOHP employee, I mean, I only knew Miss Deborah today, but everyone there is as nice as all 3 of them. And it's a really cool place to just check out. I also need to stop by because I have a foot pedal from 3 years ago that I will come bring you probably this week. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone being here.
And thank you to the Civic Media Center for hosting this, and thank you, Lee, for making it happen.
Lee,
You're
the
amazing.
best.
You're amazing.